Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true firsthand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One of the main aspects that I believe can stand in the way from having a positive plant medicine experience, even when the experience is challenging, is our overall level of health and vitality before we enter the experience. I have found that many of the clients I have worked with to help integrate their plant medicine experiences who had a challenging experience and were unable to anchor themselves afterwards were lacking in healthy habits surrounding physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. Jumping down the rabbit hole with us today on the show is a juggernaut in the realms of holistic health, fitness, and well-being who, in addition, is a proponent of plant medicines and has benefited from their presence within his life. In today's episode, we will be exploring the journey he has undergone to be able to intertwine these realms, what his personal practices are regarding food and exercise in the plant medicine space, what his biggest takeaways from these experiences have included, and much, much more. Make sure to get your excitement and laughter caps on as I welcome the one, the only Christian Van Camp to the show. What's up, Christian?
Oh, wizardly, Ryan. I'm so excited to light it up, brother. It's so excited.
Yes. Dude, we were just chatting before we hit record, man, and we're both, on 11 today in terms of energy, and I feel amazing. I was sharing with you before we started that I just had an amazing breakfast. I mentioned food in there, and there's only one place I go to around here that has high quality food. Something we explored a little bit in Highly Optimized is that they put a lot of stuff in, food these days, different seed oils and, things like that you never really know what you're getting. And so I just had an amazing breakfast with Rach for Valentine's weekend. And I'm excited to riff on this, man. Super stoked.
Oh, man, the love is in the air. It's in our tummies. It's in our hearts. It's in our souls. Let's get it going, man.
Yes, I'm excited. So, dude, one of the things I'm interested in, especially with people that are interested in health, right? Because when we think about the realm of psychedelics, the stigma, right, is that healthy people wouldn't do psychedelics, right? And we know that's completely false, right? I imagine for everyone listening, they know it's false. And one of the things I'm curious on, though, is because we were both brought up in similar generations of that indoctrination of like, hey, just say no. These things are what the outliers of society do, kind of all this type of talk around this. I'm curious for you, what originally got you into psychedelics? And when you first heard about them, were you immediately a proponent of them? Or did it take some time to weasel away maybe some, indoctrination or, stigmatization that you had heard to get you open up to the idea of psychedelics being beneficial for your well-being?
Mm-hmm. You brought up the just say no. The first thing that triggers in my head is being in elementary school and the dare. We would have a whole hour plus time just literally going over from an officer about dare, literally all the terrifying things that can happen with drugs. But of course they're alluding to, the drugs that we know of that are super harmful to our body, mind, and spirit, from meth to heroin, those kind of drugs, right? But when we dive into some of these compounds, it's incredible what they can elicit for our spiritual essence, and that transcendence. It can help us really emerge out from within us. And so, man, going off your question, I began delving into it. It was early high school. I take that back. It was about 8th grade. My good friend Dominic Reed back in the day. He was a big pothead, dude. And he totally influenced me. He was like, dude, I got this smelly stuff. And I'm like, bud, what? Weed? I've heard about weed and stuff. And yeah, I smoked a couple of the hits. I wasn't hesitant whatsoever because, he was already high when he showed it to me and he seemed like he was in a good mood and there was no negative energy around the area. And so I was like, okay, this is a good setting, kind of analyze the area. I'm at his house. It's really chill. It was a beautiful day, summer day. And I was already in a good mood. And I was like, dude, I'm going to try this, puff it a couple of times. And, that first experience, man, everyone remembers that first experience with marijuana. And that's what opened up the gates to all these different psychedelics. And so as the years passed, I began to regularly use marijuana. After that first experience, didn't really have any urge to really mess with it. But, weeks passed and it would be an occasion where it's like, oh yeah, I'll hit a couple times again. And since then, man, I mean, all throughout high school, I was periodically doing it. Never really had an addiction in quotation, like they say out there. And always had a really good relationship with marijuana. And so throughout high school, it was like once a week. Sometimes it was, 7 days a week I was smoking. And it just happens like that,
Yes.
But it immediately opened up the gates of open-mindedness and getting rid of judgment on myself, on others. That creativity totally expanded. It's amazing what marijuana can do. I have to say, though, there's a lot of experience where I had massive anxiety attacks, and I can imagine that emerged from the poor quality marijuana. It was either sprayed heavily, no idea where it was from, where it originated from, who was passed down from. And so there's that energetic sense to that. And so as I've grown closer to marijuana over the years and experimented with many different strains, it really starts with the soil. It starts with, the air, and it starts with the sunlight. It starts with the organic nature not being sprayed, and the human touch to it, the love that was given to it. Right. And so, as it progressed with marijuana, the gates of mushrooms and that psychedelic medicine came into my eyes. And I remember in sophomore year of high school, I was with a group of 3-4 of my friends, and we were like, my buddy was like, dude, we got these mushroom hookups. Let's try it out. There were some golden teacher mushrooms just by the look of them. And we were like, yeah, let's take it. So we didn't measure them out or anything. We took a good handful of them and went on a hike, and another beautiful sunny summer day. And that was an enlightening experience, man. And thereafter I had an experience with my buddy Austin, where we went to this really incredible, it was like there's buffaloes around. It's like literally you could walk around this park and there's buffaloes. There was like elk, there was deer. I forgot what it's called specifically, but it's in St. Louis. And we were just high on these mushrooms walking around. And I remember just walking on this, grassy area with my buddy off trail, which you're not supposed to do. And we turn around and literally 10 feet away from us, behind us, is laying down an elk, just a massive elk. And we're just on these mushrooms like, holy shit, dude, like what's going on? Just beautiful experiences, man. It just opened up, even beyond the visual cortex. It's literally just that feeling of warmth in your heart and that appreciation for everything that Mother Nature has to offer, for everything that the presence has to offer. It just brought me into the present moment. And even, for instance, man, last night I got these really quality organic ceremonial grade cacao bars with adaptogens in them. There's some mushrooms sweetened with monk fruit and stevia. A good buddy of mine gave them to me, and I took a microdose last night. It was around 7 p.m. Took a good 1.5 grams of the bar, and I immediately didn't want to be on technology. I immediately just wanted to meditate and just be with myself and just feel that happiness just emerged from with me. And it just brought that out of me, and it carried on till this morning. Like, I slept amazing, had amazing dreams. There is something so special about mushrooms. That's one of my favorites of all time. And as we continue, we'll go into some more, but going off the basis of your question, man, it all started in like 8th grade and just kept trickling down from there. Weeks passed, months passed, and I'm just experimenting consistently. And it's brought a lot of light in my life, man.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. Yeah, dude, it's so amazing. I still, like I was saying before we hit record, I got to pinch myself sometimes to get to realize that I get to have these amazing conversations. This is like, seriously, it's such a big dream come true that I don't even know, and I'm aware of this, I don't even know if I've fully integrated it yet. And that's one of the things that plant medicines these days really help me with, right? Is they actually help me like be present, like you were saying, and actually like sit into all the wins. Because for a long time in my life, I felt like I wasn't on quote unquote the path or track or any of these things. And, at that time, specifically cannabis became an escape for me, right? This was all unconscious. I didn't figure this out until years later. But, I was outsourcing a lot of the things that I, didn't feel I had access to, like passion, purpose, these types of things, onto the plant. Because once I interacted with the plant, I was able to become present, realize everything was fine. But then I was having a lot of, challenge in my sober state of reality. And, one of the things that I've realized these days is that, wow, like now when I sit into plant medicines, especially cannabis is my biggest teacher and the one I interact with most frequently, because I'll interact on a weekly basis. And it's just the feeling I get of just like gratitude and contentment. And, one of the things that Angelo Cisco says, who's my personal coach and, coaches men a lot, is that for men, feminine energy is a pit stop, not a rest stop. And that's something that like, once I started understanding that and interacting with cannabis and being on my path, I understood how that all worked, because it was like, yeah, I need a couple days on the weekend to like kind of rest, recuperate. And then I'm like itching to get back to it. Right. Because I really love what I do. And a lot of times what I found about plant medicines is that they unlock more purpose in my life. My number 2 on this whiteboard behind me is more purpose reveals itself in my life, right? That's like my second of my 4 main wants that I'm bringing into my reality. And it's a little open-ended, but one of the things that I noticed is that, throughout my life, the first thing I found with cannabis was that feeling of it bringing more purpose into my life. And you mentioned it perfectly, that open-mindedness, that curiosity. And I'm so grateful for it because it taught me to question everything at a really early age. And, I remember the first time I ever connected with cannabis and actually felt the effects of it, because there was one time where I was about 14 and I still had a big story of what cannabis was. And I had lots of friends that are interacting with it, but they were all kind of the typical burnout, right? Like, and I saw that and I knew that like there was something about that I was nervous about. And I remember I stayed over this girl's house with a bunch of our friends. We all went to go see her dad race stock cars. And when we got back, we pretty much stayed up all night and they were smoking weed, and they tried to get me to hit it. And I just like pulled a Bill Clinton, didn't inhale, and was like, oh yeah, I totally felt it. Right. Because I was like, this just isn't right. But I remember about 2 years later, I was 16. And this is when, I was really getting into like social drinking, these kind of things. And I've actually never told this story on the podcast. This is a fun memory, but I went to my friend's house whose dad was a state trooper, right? So, and this is back like before, I think cannabis was decriminalized at that point here in Mass, but it definitely wasn't medical or illegal like it is now. And I remember that my buddy, Danny, who's just an amazing friend of mine and super creative, he made a lightsaber steamroller. So he took a lightsaber and he essentially took the, how you extend it and it comes out in like 3 or 4 plastic parts.
Oh man, yeah.
He took the 3 or 4 like first ones off and left just the main one. And then you could light it up, and he drilled a hole into the center and put a bowl in it. So, you'd hit it like a steamroller and it was literally a lightsaber. And so I remember we went.
The force is with you for sure, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Also with you, and so we went underneath her deck. It was probably, we were having a rager at her house, and we went under her deck, and I interacted with cannabis off a lightsaber and took some big pulls. And like you might take a couple of hits off a joint. It's one thing. When you start hitting steamrollers and bongs, like you're gonna feel something. And so I went back inside. And I remember like just images in my head. It was almost like I was straight blacking out. Like this is the only time it's ever happened with cannabis, but I was legitimately blacking out, where I would all of a sudden I just woke up on this couch and I was like awake, but like I didn't have any memory of how I got there from outside. And then I had little bits and pieces of like remembering like, oh, I remember opening that door and like seeing my friend on the ground laughing and not really knowing like what, and just laughing with him. And it was like, but from that experience, I was like, wow, that was cool. And I had always interacted with alcohol and been like, am I having fun doing this? Like everyone else looks like they're having fun. But that was a questioning
thing with alcohol, I swear. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first time where I was like, I am having fun. Like this is fun. And then from there, I would take, a couple of hits, and my friends all used to joke and laugh because I was very new to it. And so I'd have a party in my house, and at the end of the night, I'd take 1 or 2 hits and just go inside and watch Star Wars, crush a whole box of Nature Valley bars, and just have a blast, right? And that was like my intro to cannabis. And so, yeah, it's really fun thinking back to it. And, I second the notion of mushrooms. Mushrooms, I just saw someone posting about this the other day. I've yet to sit with ayahuasca, but the experiences I've had on mushrooms, I mean, I don't know how much more insightful a journey can get. I mean, I've, interacted with 5-MeO DMT and some really powerful medicines, but my most profound experiences have always come from like a higher dose of mushrooms. And I mean, I'm talking from reaching what I would imagine is heaven, whatever that is. I mean, like, the other side, whatever you want to call it, just incredibly warm experiences. And, those experiences where, like you were saying, you get to sit with yourself and remember who and what you truly are, which I think is so special, especially in today's world, because what it did for me was allow me to connect again and actually like figure out what connecting to myself, to the world around me. I mean, I tell everyone, when people are like, what do you do on mushrooms? I'm like, you just go look at bark and you just like explore bark. And then you see a bug and you're like, wow, that bug's really cool. And then you'll be sitting there for hours and you won't even notice the time's going by. It's literally like you've been blasted back into the mind of a child and an adult's body. It's so fun.
Yeah, dude. And going off of that, the biggest impact on making the mushroom experience that much more riveting is being one with nature. It's great to do it indoors, with tapestries and stuff, sure, but I feel that breeze. You can literally breathe in the sounds of birds. You can taste the colors of the sky. Like you can literally have these sensations transfer into other sensations when you're out in nature. I've had the most vivid experiences being out there, and I don't think I'll ever make the decision to be like, hey, let's camp out inside. Even if it's cold outside. It's like, no, like you're going to be warm regardless. So go out in the cold, whatever the weather. Yeah, man. I think the stigma that's erupted with psychedelics in general is due to the fear. And I think there's this, the argument that, you can't attain enlightenment or some form of enlightenment through these psychedelics is crazy to me, because I think although they are exogenous and they are external and you're putting that in your body, they pull out that internal invitation to sacredness. They pull that out of you. And so it's not like that's going in you and then that's it. It's like, no, you have to still do the inner work to have that happen. Like, it's not like you just take the LSD or you pop some mushrooms or, puff in some DMT and then all of a sudden you have an enlightened experience. It's like the intention behind it is what really makes that experience so sacred.
Yeah. That's a great point to bring up because here's the thing that I personally believe. And, again, I don't have quantitative evidence to back it up or anything, but this is what I've chosen to believe in my life is that I've heard that argument of like, oh, you got there with a psychedelic, you got there with a drug, and it's like, listen, there are many different ways to get places. But considering time is the most valuable resource, I'm going to take a rocket ship when I can over walking. And it's not to say that I don't walk every single day, right? Like I don't interact with psychedelics more than a couple times per year on average. And at the same time, I'm doing all the meditating, the breath work, I'm doing the quote unquote work alongside it. But what I've noticed is that, it's kind of two-part where a lot of the people that, are more of like the sober Cobra Club, if you will, one of the things I think they fail to realize is I really don't think nature, which is such a smarter, entity than us, right? Like Mother Earth and really like the quote unquote gods, whatever you want to think, that created Gaia, this world. All that. Yeah, Gaia, exactly. They wouldn't put things on this planet that would do things like that to tell us, oh, but you can't interact with them. Like that's more of like the typical Christian type God, where it's like this God that hates you and is going to try to, pull malicious tricks on you and be like, haha, you ate the thing you weren't supposed to eat. Now I'm going to banish you forever. That's all silly, right? I understand that, and what I choose to believe is that God is what we are. And so we're each God, right? We're each come from the same source and we're individual cells of that source. And so really what I imagine, for me, at least the whole purpose of this life is to wake up to that notion. And so anything I can interact with that's going to help me with that, I'm going to explore. But you said it perfectly. It's not that you interact with these psychedelics and boom, you're there, right? Now, you might get to somewhere that would be, able to be measured on David Hawkins' scale somewhere in enlightenment, right? That level of 700 to 1,000 on the scale of consciousness while you're on a psychedelic. But that's not going to keep you there unless you're actually doing the work. It'll give you an insight. It's almost like if you could, if you had a video game and you were on the second level, but you kind of wanted to have a sneak peek of what level 10 was like because you were like, it's going to be so long before I get there. I kind of want to see what it's like. So someone else shows you them playing level 10 and then you're like, oh, cool. And they kind of give you some tips of like, hey, these are some things you're going to need to learn before you get to level 10. And so then you're able to go back to level 2 and go, ooh, I know I need to, learn this certain kick or this certain thing to defeat that boss. Right. And so by defeating the boss, I mean, certain levels of consciousness we're creating and reaching. But, for me, it's been super beneficial to be able to have those little insights because they keep me going. They fuel my fire where it's like, okay, cool. Like I've experienced what is possible. And I also know that it's not necessary to have these medicines to reach that, Right now, it might be while I'm evolving, but the goal is like, no, I'm not going to necessarily need these to get there. There might be another reason I do them, or et cetera. But yeah, that's one of the most important parts that I feel people don't talk about enough is, it's like, why the dogma guys, right? Like, hey, if you don't want to do psychedelics, great. High five. I support you. Right. But don't try then leading it over to, and I know it's the best decision for everyone. You actually don't, right? You only know what's best for yourself. Everyone's going to make their own journey. And at the end of the day, we're in soul school here, right? So anything I can use to help me in school, I'm going to do that. If I need to go take a tutor class, I'm going to go do that. And so if there's a, medicine that's been interacted with for thousands and thousands of years, I'm going to trust the thousands and thousands of years, not some person saying, well, yeah, all those people have used those for thousands of years, but in my 30 to 80 years being alive, I figured out the quote unquote right answer. It's like, I'm going to go with what the history says in terms of how long people have been interacting with these types of medicines. And so far, so good. So,
right. You're still alive, man. Yes. It sounds like you're pretty cognizant of what's going on in your life. Yeah, it's kind of like the infinite versus the finite. We have a finite life, but there's an infinite amount of people pretty much in a way that have had these, these soul stories. They're just spreading and trickling down one by one and passing it on for generations. And that crazy stuff, I think that almost emerges from me when I do these psychedelics as well. It's like that I almost feel my ancestral's wisdom. It takes away from who I am, and it taps me into this source of something I can't explain that is outside, but also within myself. And you also brought up, Ryan, which stood out to me is the DMT versus mushrooms, and how the psilocybin has almost been the biggest impact in your life. And I agree with that personally. I mean, I've done DMT. I did that a couple years ago for the first time, and it was a very beautiful experience. What it did is give me this fearlessness with death. I think that's the biggest thing, is where I'm not fearful of death. And I am literally just going through life, strutting around with confidence that this body, it's going to fade away someday. It's going to, burn. It's going to turn into dust, whatever, like I got this infinite part of me that's going to live on forever. And that's where the fear just dissipated. And I'd love, just speaking of that, I'd love to read a little bit about this journal entry I had the day after I did DMT. And I did it around midnight, January 8th of 2020. And the day after, I spent a solid, I when it was all off technology, and I took the time to really come inward the following day. It really opened up so many gates of who I am, what I'm here for, my mission. And it just gave me that breath that I never had before. And I wrote, for a solid 2.5 hours, a journal entry of just like the story beforehand, and just like in a first person writing, and, what happened during the experience. And I'd love to just read this passage right here. I think it's really awesome.
Yeah, take it away.
To be honest, as I read this wasn't me writing this. This is something else coming
Cosmic
out.
Intelligence, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yes. Like when people do ayahuasca, for instance, you mentioned you haven't done that yet, and I haven't either. And I know at some point I will be with Mother Aya at some point, but these people explain these things. We hear Aubrey Marcus and a lot of other amazing, profound individuals in the health and wellness field. They explain these things, but they aren't really explaining that. That's going through them. That plant medicine is speaking through them. So the same occurrence happened for me with this DMT. So I'll read a little bit for you guys.
Yeah, let's go.
I inhaled once, blew out quickly after full expansion, took another deep, powerful inhalation. I laid back in the plush pillows, supporting my head in posture. I exploded upwards. Fast or slow? I don't know. Both? A surge of nothingness erupted. It was me, in quotations, entering a black hole, being stretched into an abyss of pure bliss. A clap into an alternate reality. I wasn't me. No thoughts, no body. I lost the sense of my hands and feet, closed my eyes, and flew. I heard a feminine voice. She said things that I understood, although it wasn't in English. I kept hearing a mysterious breath in, a deep inhale, which might have been my own body, over and over. The sound of inhalations, which frightened me, but also brought me peace that everything was going to be all right. As I was flying upwards, I was stuck at the same time. Steady. It felt like I was soaring 1,000,000 miles per hour, but also very still. I could see a sphere, a hole of white energy above my head. Everything around this was pure black, no color, no space, no time. But inside this hole was light. Hands poured out of it, trying and attempting to pull me in. I truly wanted to join, but simply couldn't. I couldn't get any closer. They were dangling their feminine hands down, saying, "It's okay, we're here for you." But like I stated, it wasn't in English. I somehow knew. I read the love and compassion in that hole of light and all of that darkness. It was me, a particle. I must go into that open sphere. I don't know why, but the only way to find out what these feminine, like noodle-like, free-flowing hands of white energy must tell me is by entering that channel. What felt like hours, days, eternity slowly flipped scripts. I began to fall. I lost momentum, soaring upwards, and sphere of hands shrunk. I started to go in and out simultaneously from Christian to this particle. It was so nerve-wracking. Impossible to put into human words. I would begin to feel my soul entering this temple on and off continuously. I would feel my hands and feet and then head back into interstellar space. I was trying so hard to rekindle and recuperate. I opened my eyes here and there to see a wavy-like pattern of the physical world. It felt like lucid dreaming, conscious but also visually impaired from the normal clear-cut images. The tree tapestry stood out the most. Not any more colorful than normal, but it felt like an extreme dose of psilocybin with waves of the physical world. Metaphysical tied in. Eventually, I began to speak, eyes still closed, scared to see the world in a way. Ian and Sophia kept quiet to let me regain consciousness. Bless their souls. I sat up with my legs straight out, laying on the bed and breathed. I always returned to my breath when I got anxious, and I held their hands. So it's crazy because this girl, Sophia, I met that same day, and she was all about, joining in on this. My best friend Ian was there. He was kind of like the shaman at the time. And Sophia, do you know the origination of the name Sophia?
No.
It's like goddess. It's like, I believe the origination of it is just like mother-like. It's like goddess, like Sophia. Yes. And it felt so divine. Everything aligned so perfectly in that moment, because the day prior I intended on doing a DMT, but Ian couldn't get access to it. And it was like this pure, amazing source of it. And I inhaled through a crack pipe as well. And so that's not a good experience. I do not recommend that, by the way, because it was bubbling up. It inhaled directly into me. And so the whole, 3 days after, I was like spitting up crazy mucus. And I swear I had traces of DMT for the next 3 days in my system. So, but man, I bring that story up because truly, especially during the, when you first inhale, the come up and the come down are the most kind of freaky parts.
They are, for sure.
Because it's like you're constantly simultaneously, it's like a flip book. You're like almost like flipping on and off into your physical, like you understand who you are, but you're also going back to this like weird realm. It's a beautiful experience, but also it can be petrifying.
Dude, that's exactly what I experienced. And, it's funny. I noticed the couple of people who I've had share stories on the podcast. The last guy I had was Dr. Nick Berry, the essential oil wizard. And if you go if you go back and listen to that episode of him on this podcast, his starts out very similar to yours, like with how many inhales he took. It's really similar. You guys' stories, they're very similar, and that's exactly what I experienced. I mean, when I went there, I had a facilitator who we were using a pen system. So they had a series of pens, number 1 through 6. And 1 was like, basically what they do is they slowly get you up to speed. So like 1 was like nothing. 2, you feel a little bit. 3, it's like, okay, there's something there. 4 is like, whoa, shit. And then 5 and 6 are just like nonsense. I mean, it's complete whiteout. And his partner was playing sound bowls while I was going out. And, what I learned after, because I've danced with this medicine twice, is the first time I went to pen number 4, and that was like really intense for me. And the second time I went to pen number 6 and did a full inhale on it. And it was, I don't remember, like I literally turned into nothing. And then what I felt was this like warm pressure in my chest. she had taken this beautiful crystal sound bowl and put it directly on my chest and started singing it as soon as I was blasting off. And so this sound was guiding me. Like literally, it was like as I was shooting off like 1,000 rocket ships, I was following the line of sound. It was like, okay, that's where I go. And it brought me directly to what I would imagine is source. And you know, if you want to call it NSOF, I don't know exactly what the terminology is for, because again, like you said, it's extremely hard to put any of this into human words because it is beyond words. But, you know, that was one of the first things I realized was Tesla was right. Like if you want to think about, if you want to understand the universe thing in terms of sound and vibration or whatever, you know, quote he said like that, I was like, that was extremely accurate. I knew that right off the bat. That was like the last thought I had consciously as I was just losing my consciousness to go out. And, you know, I really enjoy that medicine. And it's something where I'm like, yeah, that's something that I don't look for. If it happens to show up, I'll potentially interact with it, but it's so intense that, you know, that's why I enjoy psilocybin and things like that, because it's a little bit slower of a come up. That's like, I don't even know how to put it in terms of context of speed, but it is, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, you're there one moment and then you start vibrating, and in 3 seconds, the vibrating starts in your fingertips and it's literally all over your body. And then you're vibrating so hard that you're not even a body anymore. And then you're gone. And then you're just getting led, and it's like complete surrender, whether or not you were ready to surrender or not. It's like, you better be ready to surrender. Like,
you have to surrender, man. Like I had to keep going back to my breath when I was going back into myself, you know, during the come down. And I failed to mention that was actually an hour after that, I did another 4 hits in a row, because I don't know if you kind of could tell when I was reading, I was this white light and this darkness, and I was looking up through this hole. And it felt like I needed to go shoot up through there in order to have that full, you know, you get to the other side, you basically expand. They say with the DMT, you kind of reach that point where you just, once you get to that point of the level of DMT in your system, you're kind of just expanding on and on. And I was at this level where I was almost like still resisting. I was like, I didn't have enough in my system. And so an hour later, after kind of decompressing, kind of feeling that out, because that was an intense 5 minutes, to be honest, that was 5 minutes, guys. It felt like it was
hours.
insane.
Yeah.
It felt like hours, days. I don't know. Crazy. So yeah, an hour later, I took 4 hits in a row. I was like, oh shit, I can't hit this again. I do it 3 more times. I lie back, and that was the clap. That was like literally when it became nothing. And that's when I had this death understanding, where I'm like, literally it was 15 minutes for this time period now, where I was straight up gone. There was no definition of who I am as the yin and yang. It was death, life. It was hatred and love. Everything was combined and colliding. And for me, you know, I didn't get to see some elves. I didn't get to have any of those experiences some people have with DMT. I had this experience of pure bliss and nothingness. And nothingness has this connotation of negativity around it, but it wasn't. It was just like pure nirvana and serenity. It was just nothing, as in like, there's nothing to complain about. There's nothing to be happy about. It's like, it's perfect.
Vacation vibration.
Yeah, I love that. Vacation vibration. Exactly, man.
It's like, hello, everybody. I hope you are all enjoying the show. I wanted to stop by and fill you in on our brand new, completely free to join Facebook community called the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle. Now, I imagine many of you are aware of the newest creation within Highly Optimized, which is the Connect with Cannabis 10-week coaching certification program. Alex and I have been having so much fun empowering coaches with the skill set of coaching with cannabis and helping them up-level their coaching practice that we wanted to create a place where anyone could join to ask questions, receive free information on how to work with cannabis in the way we teach in the program, and be able to gain clarity around how to get the best results with their clients in order to become financially independent in their coaching practice. To join, hop over to the link in our Instagram bio and send us a request. It is our intention to assist as many coaches, facilitators, and healers as possible in the important work they are doing in the world. And if you are looking to join a community of like-minded individuals just like you, who are passionate about helping their clients achieve the highest quality of life possible, the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle is for you. I am looking forward to speaking with all of you in the group, and as always, enjoy the show. Hammock energy on a Caribbean beach energy, you know, like that's like what it is, where it's just like, I got nothing on the schedule. I got nothing to do. I don't got nothing on my mind. I'm just hanging out. Right. But it, you know, it's almost like, to put it in an analogy, like that's the goal. That's where you can get. But, it's almost like beforehand, you have to run a Spartan race. It's like you run a Spartan race to be able to hang out in the hammock. And the Spartan race is what I call the werewolf stage, where you're normal. You think you're prepared. Like, I don't know if there's ever a way, at least for me, to fully prepare for what 5-MeO specifically does before I interact with it. Because I can understand, even having experienced it, like, okay, this is going to be really intense. I'm going to make sure I do all my things, get plenty of rest the night before, all this stuff. But there's always a werewolf stage where I'm like, oh my God, it's almost like with combo, same thing, right? No matter how many times you've done it, it still sucks on the come up, right? When you're like, okay, I'm starting to, like swell up and all this stuff. And with, 5-MeO specifically, it's like, that werewolf stage of like, okay, I'm interacting the medicine. I'm still me, but I'm transforming into the next level. Like that in between is what I call the werewolf stage, right? Because it's kind of like, it's awkward, it's weird, but then you become the werewolf and you're like, okay, cool, I'm there now. And then you could, when you come back through, there's also another, segment of that werewolf stage where you're starting to come out of that state and you're starting to reintegrate. It's almost like getting woken up from a nap when you nap too long and you're kind of like, oh, what time is it? Like your circadian rhythm's kind of messed up. And then eventually you get, like centered back into harmony and, you go on about your night. But yeah, I've always thought about that stage is the most challenging part. Once I'm there and it's fine. But
yeah, right.
That's that stage, that disintegration stage where you're disintegrating from who you normally are. And then you're integrating into a new reality. And then like, on the rewind, you're disintegrating out of that new reality and coming back into and integrating into your regular reality. That's been the most challenging times for me. And, that's where, like you were saying, having the tools handy, breath, having supporters there. I mean, 5-MeO, and DMT in general is one of those things where I don't do it alone. I just choose not to. I'd always like to have someone there that can hold my hand, that can, that I can just feel safe around, because it is, I mean, it's an experience, like it's very different. And so, yeah, I feel like that's where a lot of the tools come in so handy, is when you're, going through that werewolf stage, you can come back to your breath, you have people around you, that support you. Those things are so important.
Yeah, finding the right people is key. Like it was all divine timing. Like I wasn't planning this for weeks. This was something that happened within 3 days. Ian was like, "Hey, man, I got this quality DMT that's from a friend of mine that he's had this for years." And I was like, "This is wonderful." Okay, like I'm not really anticipating doing this, but let's do this. I'm not like hesitant. I'm not like all for it, but I'm like, this sounds about right timing. It's the beginning of 2020. This is pre-COVID, by the way. This is a month before COVID and stuff. So that also was like a huge like smack in the face of like, wow, that everything's almost lining perfectly in my life. Like this gave me this understanding of who I am, having a fear, less fear around death, and an understanding of how precious life is right as everything gets shut down. Like it's so crazy. Yeah, I think the main thing too is, during that kind of come up period and the come down is just closing your eyes and straight up just not trying to like get too much in your physical environment, because you're about to leave that shit. I think that's helped me a lot in those previous experiences with psilocybin, with even sometimes with marijuana, closing my eyes before I hit it and just like absorbing how I feel right now in this moment. How do my sensations feel? Are my hands clammy? Is my heart rate increasing? Cool. Let's breathe through that. Let's close my eyes. Let's accept that. And let's get rid of that fear and say, fuck that shit. Let's hop into this. And that once you say, like, I'm ready to do this, and you really breathe into what's available at that present moment, all fear goes away. And then you're just in that enlightened space you mentioned, the werewolf phase goes away.
Yeah. It's so perfect and powerful, to talk about these things, because, a lot of times what I found is that, sometimes when you go through these things, you're like, has anyone else ever experienced this? And then when you realize people have, it's like, interesting. And that's one of the main reasons I made this platform, right? Because there are people that have done them. They want to understand what other people have gone through. And there are people that haven't done them that might be curious. And there are people that might not have done it, that might not ever want to, but are just curious to hear people's stories and, learn from them and whatnot. But one of the things that I think, psychedelics in general have helped me with more than almost anything is something that Carl Jung talks about is of utmost importance. And when we think about the world right now, it becomes even more true, which is the process of individuation, where essentially we get to, like you were saying, understand who you really are, understand what your, like the different parts of you are, right? Like, oh, I have an ego. I'm not my ego. Oh, I have a heart. I'm not necessarily my heart. So what am I? Oh, I'm infinite spirit embodied into the physical realm with this beautiful bridge that's called the soul. Cool. This is amazing. And so for me, it's given me this process of, not only individuation, but, to kind of go on like a more concentrated basis of that, the ability to tap into my sovereignty. And this is something I'm curious for you, because you obviously are out there crushing it. You're living your dream. You're giving it a full send in life. And I love talking to other, sendosauruses, as I like to say, people that are, giving it a full send and are, doing what they love. Because one of the things I'm aware of is that a lot of us, we don't get to do what we love. And so it's a challenge to be able to, discover that some days. And so one of the things I'm curious on for you is, how have psychedelics helped you in creating sovereignty and creating and living life on your own terms? Because this is something that, especially with the state of the world right now, we're starting to realize like, hey, it may or may not, soft talk acknowledge, it may or may not work out better if we do our own things. Then we're not told we have to do certain things. We have our ability to be sovereign, etc. So I imagine for a lot of people listening, it'd be great to hear how psychedelics have helped you with sovereignty, because that's a big, challenge and, topic right now in society.
Yeah, I mean, another word for sovereignty, we can get a full grasp on that, is freedom, right? And
yes,
for me, it's just like being free from confining myself in certain thought patterns. And so I've notoriously thought very negatively throughout my life. I have constantly been delved into spaces where I'm like, I'm not good enough. I don't know if I can reach that level. I don't even know if I can ever converse with someone like that, or be at that level of status, or, all this stuff that's like externals, like, fame and related to money. It's like, in our society, we're constantly bombarded by that. And especially at a young age in early teens and 20s, when we're trying to figure out who the fuck we are, those psychedelics for me have opened up that sovereignty. They've allowed me to realize, wow, I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks, in a very positive way. I don't care what anyone thinks. And it's allowed me to realize like, wow, what really matters is how I think of myself. And so, that at the simultaneous interaction with psychedelics, like the mushrooms, we mentioned some of these stories throughout high school, I started really getting into, fitness a lot more, weightlifting. I started delving into nutrition early college. And that experience with listening to Ben Greenfield, started listening to all these different people, connecting with Ben Greenfields and all these people in the health and wellness space, podcasters. Paul Chek started emerging in my life. That simultaneously with the psychedelics opened up this understanding. It's like, wow, my purpose on this planet is to follow these wise words, which have been ingrained in my head from these podcasts. And so the wise words are, let's combine health of ourselves and our sovereign health with the health of the planet. So one of my big visions on this planet is to merge healthy organic nutrition with how that affects our bodies. It also affects the soil. It also affects the planet. It also gives that rejuvenation for everything else that is necessary for all life on Earth. And so that sovereignty emerged over the years. And I think that I don't give a fuck mentality has helped me a ton with this direction, because it's like, oh, I had this insecurity of beginning to, let's say, post on Instagram or create these content about nutrition and health. And people understood me in high school as this goofy guy who was cracking jokes all the time, eating ketchup with Oreos as a dare and stuff that was stupid, right?
Yeah.
Just a bunch of silly stuff I held on to as who I define myself as. But as I grew older and learned more about who I am and what I really am here for, I had to get rid of that. I had to let go, and I had to start becoming this new person I define myself as, because I had this passion emerging for health and vitality for everyone. And once I started experiencing this vitality myself through some health struggles and things along those lines, I was like, everyone can experience this too. And that sovereignty kept emerging and growing and expanding. And so I'd say it definitely ties directly to sovereignty with psychedelics. That influence has tied directly with my passion for nutrition, for fitness. And, even just bringing this all up, Ryan, I'd love to dive into as well, to segue into the importance of nutrition and fitness for your experience with psychedelics.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think it's a perfect time. And, I loved, hearing about what you were just talking about, because, another idea that, kind of could be described as sovereignty or freedom as well as, identity alchemy. And I think that's exactly what you were talking about. Something I had to go through too when I started getting healthy. My friends expected me to fall into old patterns. Like, come on, just, eat this bad food, stay out late. And I had to start saying no. And that was so hard for me. But psychedelics definitely helped me with that as well. And, like we were just talking about a second ago, what I found is that, speaking about food and things like that, for me, I think we were talking about this before we hit record too, is that these days when people say like, hey, do you have cheat days? And I'm like, well, it depends on what you consider a cheat day. Because for me, a cheat day now is like getting the highest quality, treats made with organic cacao and like, coconut products and things like that. And that to me is my Oreos, right? So when people are like, oh, you don't, you take yourself too seriously or let yourself have some fun, I'm like, no. My main source of fun is how fucking amazing I feel every day. Like there is nothing that beats that. And, now food has become this thing where, yeah, I still have fun, but my fun is calculated because I like to feel good. So how can I third door my way there? Like we were talking about before we hit record too. How can I third door and have my cake and eat it too and make sure it's gluten-free? And so I love that we're segueing now into, food choices and health choices with regards to psychedelics, because the profound effects that are possible when we get that on point is so powerful. And so I'd love for you to get into that, what your certain food choices are that you found around, around psychedelics, whether or not you fast beforehand, and any recommendations you have in terms of like, how someone could, if they're interested in trying some of this, this food hacks, if you will, out with psychedelics, they could do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it all depends on the psychedelic, of course. Like we could even say marijuana starting off with, if you're going to, smoke marijuana, personally, I recommend a high fat, high protein diet. So you don't have the cravings erupt with blood sugar crashes. And then at night, you're like bashing all this food because you don't have the brain juice to hold yourself accountable to what's real, right? I've been there quite a bit. Like when my blood sugar drops, I smoke some weed. I'm like, fuck, dude, I really want to bash all that cereal. And but it really, if all day you're having some, grass-fed, sustainably grown meat. I know you're big on the butcher box we brought up. Just having some nourishing, healthy fats like the coconut oil, you said, ghee, grass-fed ghee, butter, olive oil, those types of things. Load up on that all day long. You can have some carbs, of course, but don't make it the high glycemic carbs. That will make those cravings go down, and your experience on that marijuana much more rejuvenating. Now, when it comes to things like mushrooms, for instance, we all hear about the upset stomach people get with it. They're like, I'm not looking forward to this. I'm going to get nauseated. I'm going to puke. The moments that I've had puking experiences from mushrooms is due to the fact that I had a lousy meal beforehand, or, I wasn't fasted. And personally, I do enjoy that light feeling of being fasted when I take mushrooms personally, especially if they're fully chewed and there's, they're not hardy. So making sure you chew them fully. And if you really want to enhance the psilocybin, you probably know about this, Ryan, combining with like lemon juice, right? That can, it doesn't, the experience doesn't last as long, which is the unfortunate part because it's kind of absorbing a little quick, but it does enhance the absorption like rapidly, and it can hit you much harder if that's your goal. I've made amazing elixirs with mushrooms where I grind it up in a coffee grinder, put it in I don't put it in boiling water because I don't know what that's doing, if it's going to denature some of the psilocybin, but put in some hot water, steep some tea bags in there with ginger, fresh ginger, some things that are good for the gut and kind of nourish that, help with the absorption. Therefore, you can throw in maybe a little pinch of black pepper. Who knows if that helps? We hear about that helping with the absorption of turmeric and other compounds. So that could be beneficial. And there's been a time where I put a little bit of MCT oil because there might be some fat soluble things in the mushrooms that are even beyond the psychedelic, but the medicinal parts of it, some sort of fat source. And, just stack a bunch of adaptogens, things that will, are good for your brain. I've put alpha GPC with mushrooms, and that's helped with just this kind of acetylcholine boost, almost enhancing the focus while I'm on it. Especially if you tie that in with microdosing, that's wonderful.
Is that a peptide, or is that something? Where have I heard that before? Alpha GPC.
It's in Alpha Brain with gotcha. Aubrey Marcus. Yeah, but there's I love just getting it on like different websites. There's some other nootropics depot and things you can get it on. But yeah, it's amazing. It's a precursor to acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that's profound for memory and focus, and so that can even boost your mood a little bit. Stacking it with some things like that, some natural precursors, lion's mane, even get the other mushroom in there, the medicinal mushroom, but things that will help amplify that fortitude within you through these medicines, right? It doesn't have to be just the psilocybin. Get fun with it, right? Experiment with some things, and that's helped me a lot. Even just fasting and having just like spirulina or chlorella with the mushrooms, some nourishment, right? Because that brain juice can help you feel more at ease with the experience and lighter. Some omega-3s, some fish oil, some krill oil, things like that. But overall, I prefer to be fasted, take some electrolytes, drink a ton of water beforehand, some spring water, filtered water with a Berkey, whatever it may be. And yeah, have at it, do the tea, that kind of stuff. But if you're looking to have a meal, I personally don't recommend eating anything with the mushrooms. I have had many experiences where I'm like, oh, let's have some like sandwich with it with Nutella. Yeah. I'm like, what am I doing?
I know, dude.
you lay it out there. Yeah, it tastes good. It's like, dude, that's kind of disrespectful in a way. You're taking this nature's blessing and you're putting some of this processed shit with
Wonder Bread.
Wonder, right? Wonder hell. Like, God.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I recommend, just having stuff from nature, as best you can. Even just a light apple, something that, that you can combine fruit with it, that can be helpful. In eating 2 hours prior to the mushroom experience, you can kind of, digest and let that move through the stomach and go through the colon, so you can start assimilating the mushrooms themselves. I'm getting really technical and kind of sciencey here, but I love this stuff. It's combining. It's
amazing.
It's amazing. Physiology is so cool, man. It's like just knowing what is going on in our body through nutrition. That one little compound you put in there, that pinprick, can affect everything. That macrocosm effect. With other ones like the DMT and stuff, you mentioned 5-MeO. I'm very interested in that at some point.
Oh man. Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Next level, right? Yeah. Yes. I've read the book, How to Change Your Mind, several years ago. And that's just a profound book. A lot of his stories with Michael Pollan is really beautiful. Highly recommend that if you guys are starting off with understanding the basics of psychedelics and MDMA and all this. We haven't even talked about MDMA yet. That's another one.
I know.
There's so many things to talk about, man.
I know, man. It's like Christmas morning.
Speaking of MDMA, while we're on that, hydration is so key. They say pop a Molly, I'm sweating, right? It's true. Like, you are really, running through the reservoirs of water. And so it can lead to some dangerous situations if you aren't getting those electrolytes in the water, some salt. Those kind of things are fundamental. And so even with MDMA, they talk about, pop your 5-HTP afterwards to get your serotonin regulated. It's wonderful. I'm not talking trash, but there's so many other ways to go about it too. Magnesium, right? I'm big on Bioptimizer's one because it has the 7 forms in it. So magnesium is critical. We got a ton of other things that can help boost that serotonin other than 5-HTP. And I think just focusing on healthy nutrition is the biggest part about that. Getting adequate movement, keeping stress levels low the day prior. Like, there's so many things.
100%. And I'm glad you brought up MDMA, because this is one of the medicines that, like, psilocybin, 5-MeO DMT, even LSD, they're quasi-safe, right? Like, and I mean safe in the terms of, like, you can't take enough that you're going to kill yourself. I mean, 5-MeO potentially, LSD, who knows? They really haven't found a half-life for it. I don't think, last I checked anyway. But with MDMA, right, there are some challenges that you can run into with it. And, being someone who's gone to music festivals for years and did not interact with any types of, plant medicines or drugs when I was there for a long time, I saw a lot of people making some interesting life decisions, right? And no judgment, right? But one of the main things that I tell people with MDMA is, like, please do not combine it with alcohol. Like, that is just absolute. First of all, alcohol for me is just the worst effect. So why would you want to combine that with something that's going to be unbelievably powerful, that's going to bring down the unbelievably euphoric and powerful one? So what, you can have a beer or two of some crappy beer? It just doesn't make any sense. And then the other thing too is, with MDMA, what I've learned about it from the doctors I've talked to about it, they have specific protocols for preloading and postloading. And this will involve things like, obviously magnesium, PQQ, lactoferrin, grapeseed extract, green tea extract, alpha lipoic acids, acetyl L-carnitine. There's all these different things you can take before, during, and after that are going to help your body replenish what it's going through. The other thing is quality, right? When it comes to things like Molly, I mean, we know what's been happening for years with people selling research chemicals under the name of MDMA. And so that's a really, it's one of my favorite medicines, and one that, gets a lot of challenges just because of, one side is prohibition of it, but also because people just don't think or prepare right for that one. And that one can be a little bit of a depleter. And that's why I tell people, MDMA is something I'll interact with a couple times a year max at this point in my life. And that's why I'm so grateful that I didn't do it when I was younger, because I had a lot of anxiety around what it might do, because I noticed people doing it every weekend. And those people definitely had some very negative side effects. You can burn out your serotonin receptors, and, that's not something I wanted to experience. And so I'm so
Mhm.
grateful that I had anxiety, right? Like we talk about, like, one of the things that psychedelics have helped me with is actually help me realize how grateful I am for like my quote unquote faults, because they've helped me so much through my life. And now I get to kind of take off the training wheels and, use it accordingly. But, one of the other things you talked about too is, with mushrooms, for instance, what I love doing with mushrooms is fasting, like you said, unless I'm doing it at night and there's a certain thing. And then in which case I'll eat about an hour or two beforehand, and I'll have like a lighter meal, maybe a little bit of protein, but nothing, just enough to like keep me going for the next 6 hours until I can have some fruit. Because what I love doing with mushrooms is, like I said, if it's the morning fasting, and then when I'm about 3-4 hours into the experience and I've gotten my kind of big downloads and now I'm ready to go rejoin the group and start laughing and having a shared experience, having a huge fruit bowl with nut butter. That's like I'm talking raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, apple, mango, everything
Pineapple,
just piled
all
together,
that shit.
pineapple with a hunk of butter right in the middle. And you have like, I've gone to I went to this one men's retreat where I'll never forget just like the feeling of, we had some sitters that were taking care of us, and there's about 18 guys that were on the medicine and about 3 or 4 that weren't. And I'll never forget, I had my back turned to the door and we're outside. It's in Colorado. We're loving life, and my buddy Ben is on the other side of me, and we're talking and like we're kind of trailing off. He's like, yeah, and just, oh my God. And I'm like, what? I can't see what's coming. And then a big, huge fruit bowl just lands right in the middle of us. And it was like straight caveman, just hands, just like, oh my God. Like it literally brought me back to like, I was like, wow, whatever memory this is from is like 1,000 lifetimes ago. And it was just the best feeling ever. And that's what I love. I love the fruit when I'm interacting with a psychedelic and I'm on the downwind of it, because the other thing too is, because you're eating a lot of sugars, you're going to have a little bit of crash after and get to relax. And that's kind of like the main type of effect I like after going through an experience like that. And there's just nothing like nature Skittles, aka fruit, when you're in that experience. So I love that you brought that up, man. Fruit's one of my favorite things.
Oh, dude, it's game changing. The hydration from it, it's just so easy to digest. There's so many reasons to stack
like
fruit
watermelon, dude.
Experience.
I forgot about watermelon, bro. You all right?
Cantaloupe and mango,
dude,
or yeah, that's stuff.
I have never experienced self-love as much as when I've been like knee deep in a journey and I start to come out just a little bit. And I remember, dude, you bought a watermelon before this. And I'm like, holy shit. And you go downstairs and you just bite in the watermelon and you just laugh so hard because you can't imagine that anything tastes that good. It's like when I come back in, especially after a very deep journey, it's like I'm a child doing everything for the first time. Like, oh my God, I have fruit. What's fruit like? Ooh, what's this like? Oh my God, cannabis. Let's try some cannabis. Like, I'm like, almost like it's like I'm a kid in a candy shop, just picking a little bit of everything, and it's that I think is my favorite moment, when you realize you bought fruit beforehand and you're like, your 6-year-old self is running and high-fiving your adult self because both of you are in complete alignment with one another. That's the most beautiful moment.
Dude, it's that catalyst of appreciation and gratitude after those experiences, because you're like, oh shit, I have this skin, I have this hair, I have these eyes that can see. It is, yeah. And then the taste, man, that's like another level. It's like sensory of the taste, and the palate just totally transforms as well. It's like your appreciation for what is nourishing your body. I've never really craved like, let's get a burger after. So it sounds horrible. Like it's on a heavy thing like that, but yeah, man, there's so many ways nutritionally and, even fitness related. I'd say just like moving while you're on mushrooms can be very transcendental as well.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, you're walking with that motion. And I don't know if you've done walking meditations before. That can be an experience as well, when you got like some binaural beats and some soundproof or noise canceling headphones on and such. That can really be an experience. And yeah, walking meditations, there's like a Joe Dispenza one out there. It's really good. And it's really crazy when you're moving your physical body while you're on this elevated state. It's really interesting because you're kind of going back and forth, kind of like what I said about DMT. It's like this going back and forth between myself and this source energy, and having that with mushrooms is next level.
It's truly amazing, man. It's one of the things that I love that you mentioned the walking meditations and such, because that's one of the things I've found for like, littler doses of mushrooms. I love getting out of the nature and putting some binaural beats on and having more of an active experience where my bigger experiences are usually very yin, where I'm like meditating the whole time and doing maybe a little breath work and listening to some frequency healing. I love to have the other side too, where I'm like still a functioning human, right? And I can walk around, and if I see anyone in the park, I can talk enough to like get my way out of the conversation, and things like that. But, but being able to have those binaural beats and really, be present in nature, that's been one of the most powerful types of experiences I can have. And also playing music too. I mean, I play guitar, and some of the best things I've written have come, from a plant medicine experience. I remember when I was younger, when I was around 16, 17, I took a few hits of cannabis, too many hits of cannabis, when I was a very junior baker status. And I came inside pretty overwhelmed and a little anxious. And I hopped on the guitar and made one of the best songs ever. And I was just, it totally got me out of that experience. And it was just so amazing, man, because, I just, even at that age, before I knew anything that I know now about health, there was something that was like, control, alt, delete yourself from the thinking that you're in right now, because you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it, and get yourself into something new that will take your focus off it. And essentially guitar became my mantra, right? It was like I was playing guitar, and that's what I was focusing on. My monkey mind had something to focus on. I was creating something beautiful that was capturing my attention. And it was just, I think having those kind of things too, to be anchors, are really powerful too. So that if you start having a little bit of a, anxiety thing or something, like, okay, I'm going to go do breath work. I'm going to play guitar. I'm going to put some binaural beats on. I'm going to draw. I'm going to paint. Having those kind of things handy are really powerful. And also the other side too, if you're like, wow, I'm having an amazing time, and now I want to play guitar and paint or do any of those things too, having those things around is really fun.
You brought up art, man. I was just about to bring that up. Just anything artistic in that creativity to get it out of that frontal cortex is like so key, because I've had so many profound art experiences, just painting and drawing. And I like painting a little bit more because it can be a little bit more whimsical and feminine with it, where it's kind of flowing and you're like, fuck it, that's there, that's there, that color. Like, but with I'm very detail oriented with my art. I've always been that way, just very meticulous and drawing like very clear cut. But when I could just release that idea of being very, structured and masculine, it's like, whoa, holy shit, this is gorgeous. Like,
yeah. Dude, I always say, I joke that I'm a recovering perfectionist, because I'm the same way, right? Where I love things to be quote unquote perfect color inside the lines, but there's such a beauty to being able to just be like, fuck it, I'm just going to draw and see what happens. And I think that's like, really a symbolism for life, right? Because the more that you think about being perfect, the more that you're going to essentially spin your tires, right? Because you're going to be like, well, I want to go do this, but is it the perfect time yet, right? Versus like, fuck it, I'm going to take massy action, go give it a full send. And if I fail, cool, I learned something. If I win, awesome, I achieved something. And I think that's like one of the things that, talking again about things psychedelics have taught me is like, dude, you're only here for a short while, right? In this meat suit anyway. And I happen to like this meat suit a lot. So I'm going to give it a full send and see what happens, and not worry so much about what people think of me and all this stuff that we talked about earlier. Just give it a full send, because if I truly love myself, then all I'm going to worry about is that love for myself. And all I'm going to think about is that love for myself. And as within, so without. So anyone who's not able to match that love I have for myself with how much they love me, they're just not going to be in my life very long. And that's fine. They can have, no judgment. They're probably going to end up living perfect lives and end up with the people that they're meant to be with. And so, I think we all have a duty to, to figure ourselves out. And, because when we do, we have an ability to find the people and places and things that are directly in alignment with us. And the more that we try to fake it and people please and do these things that I imagine you fell into, and I know I fell into for a while, and worry about what others think, the more that we're, essentially surrounding ourselves with people that, might not be exactly right for us, but might be fitting in because we're, they're comfortable with who we're looking to be at that time. But, one of the things psychedelics help with so much, and, I say they can help so much because they don't objectively help so much, like we talked about, is, saying like, fuck it, I went through a death experience. Like, that's fine. I'm not worried about that anymore. So here's the adventure. This is the journey. Let's go. And so I love that, man. And bro, this has been an amazing time, dude. We flew through this hour so quickly. I want to make sure you have ample time to tell people where they can find you, what your services you offer are, because there are plenty and they're amazing. And all that jazz, man. Tell people where they can get in contact with you.
Awesome, Ryan. I had a blast. Thank you guys for listening. If you guys want to reach me, I'm very active on Instagram at CVC Wellness, and you can also look up cvcwellness.com. All my good stuff's on there, from my blog to a lot of deals and different partnerships with amazing companies out there, all holistic optimization based. And I just finished up revamping a lot of my program for men, InnerFit. And just as it sounds, it's all about getting that inner fortitude before you can start working on that outer meat sack you mentioned, right,
Yes.
Ryan? So, it goes through 6 pillars: mindset and purpose, nutrition and gut, schedule, sleep and stress, weight training and movement, nature and sun. And last but not least, the icing on the cake is the connection, community, and brotherhood. And so, helping nature-driven men out there achieve balance, maximizing that energy, building the lean muscle, and optimizing that productivity with all the holistic, healthy lifestyle routines and habits is what I'm here for. So that's what I've been revamping lately, and it's all ready and set up to go. And it's a lot of fun, man. It's just like, getting optimized for health that's a dreary thing. It's not a task. It's fun if you make it fun. So I'm all about that.
Hell yeah. Yeah, guys. Christian is a gangster. He not only talks the talk, but he walks the walk. And Christian, speaking of that, I got one last question for you, my man. And that is this: if someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that Christian would give them to allow them the smoothest experience possible?
This is definitely easier said than done, but I think it's just letting go of where you've been, what you've seen, who you've interacted with, the mistakes you've made. And like you said in the earlier on in this podcast, it's really utilizing all those faults, all those mistakes you've made as a catalyst to move forward. Because without those mistakes, you would not have made change. So I'd say, letting go and utilizing that as, be an alchemist and start utilizing that to create new compounds in your life that will bring you forth to more rejuvenation and enlightenment.
Yes. As a wise man once said, I'll take nail in the head for 500, please.
Love it, man. Love it.
Yes. Guys, was that a fun ride or what? Christian is someone who, when I met, I felt instantly connected to, as we share a very similar lifestyle and approach to life as a whole. His ability to take topics such as health, fitness, and plant medicines, and not only intertwine them, but also keep them fun and leave the dogma at the door surrounding these topics that so many individuals in this world take on, is a truly special skill set that not many hold. For anyone listening who is looking to create a higher expression of the quote-unquote set aspect of the set and setting, including the totality of energy that you bring to the plant medicine equation so that you can allow your plant medicine experiences to resonate at a deeper level, make sure you reach out to Christian and follow him to learn the habits that will allow you to turn your breakdowns into breakthroughs and gain a lot of fun and fulfillment simultaneously. Christian, thank you so much for stopping by the show, for doing the important work you do, and for being a bright light in my life. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.
Aho.